This is Megan Sheridan. I'm doing a podcast on the year 1885, major changes and what stayed the same throughout the year.
Good evening, Megan. I believe you have a little bit of history to share with us this morning.
Yes, I do. In 1885, the Canadian Pacific Railway was close to being finished. The railway was originally built between Eastern Canada and British Columbia between the years of 1881 and 1885. I'm focusing on the year 1885 because in this year Canada had built the grand 22,500 kilometers of railway track all across Canada into the United States.
Wow! Where was this built from?
It was built from Montreal to Vancouver. This railway stretched. The Canadian Pacific Railway became one of the largest transportation in Canada. It served not only as a people carrier, but also shipping many oils, gas, and stacks of objects.
You know what? I'm pretty sure I have rode this train before.
It's a great thing to have in Canada. It was an easy fix for Canada's expansion to create a nation. John A. Macdonald promised his citizens that if he became Prime Minister, he would build a transcontinental railroad that would link all the provinces of Canada together. The government gave the Canadian Pacific Railroad $25 million in cash and 10 million hectares of fertile land and an exemption from taxes.
Incredible! Did all this of the Canadian citizens work on the railroad or had a certain role of people to work on it?
Canada had Asian, mostly Chinese citizens to move over and build this railroad across Canada on very low wages. Canada's government and citizens did not want the Chinese or Japanese living in Canada and taking their jobs, but the Asian worked for such little wage that the government didn't really mind them staying in Canada.
Oh, approximately how many Chinese and Japanese emigrated?
Over 17,000 Chinese came from the years of 1880 and over the next few years to follow. British Columbia had a bigger Chinese population coming from the gold rush that had happened in 1850, but the racism towards the Chinese had also grown by Canada. In the year 1885, some articles of newspapers and Canada's magazines had mocked Chinese and portrayed them in a foul way. With all the concern towards Chinese men, many proposals were put forward to limit or restrict Chinese immigration, Chinese rights, and the participation in Canada's economy. Some acts were passed, such as the British Columbia Qualifications of Voters Act, that denied Chinese and First Nations the right to vote. Later on, once the railroad was built, the Chinese Immigration Act of 1885 was passed to slow down Chinese immigration by charging a $50 head tax upon arrival in Canada. We cannot forget about our Prime Minister, who was there all the way through 1885.
Who had the same goal throughout his time being Prime Minister until he had it complete.
1885 was a big year that got a lot of major projects finished in a great amount of time.
1885, Louis Riel was hanged in Regina. Isn't that right?
Yes, previous in the year, a storm was brewing with the Métis and their culture and civilization being taken away and stomped on. The Battle of Batoche was the battle of the Northwest Rebellion, Canadian authorities against the Métis. The Métis were defeated, losing the struggle for rights, and the Métis had to continue living among Canada's expanding land.
Wow, the Métis still had a ways to go following the year 1885.
Yes, that is true. Touching the First Nation and Métis role in Canada, the Indian residential school system continued to happen. Schools that Indian children were forced to go to so the new settlers in Canada could remove them from their families, ancestral languages, and cultural backgrounds to civilize Canada.